Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the July 1st, 2024 council meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock p.m. We're in the Kitty Hawk Town Hall in the Smith Room. Thank you all for coming. We have a problem with our live streaming tonight, so those of you who are expecting to see us at home, you will see this hopefully on a recorded program later on the Kitty Hawk website, but we apologize for that. If everyone would join me, if you're able to stand, please join in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Council, I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Charlotte, second.
Second.
Second by Dylan. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, public comment. Lauren, do we have anyone signed up for public comment, please?
I'm sorry. Yes, we do.
Okay.
They can speak at public hearing. That's fine.
No problem. Anyone signed up for public comment? Anyone like to speak at public comment? Okay, we'll get to the public hearing portion later on, folks. Thank you for coming. Council, I need a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Thank you, Dylan. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. We had no items removed. Planning. Council, Rob, if you come up, Council, I need a motion to go into public hearing regarding text amendment 42-1, accessory workforce housing, non-residential properties. Can I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing. Rob?
This first text amendment before you tonight, it's proposed amendments to section 42-1, adding the two definitions listed in the staff report for accessory use workforce habitation and accessory workforce housing. The application was submitted. The proposed language would provide commercial property owners in Kitty Hawk with greater flexibility, providing the opportunity to develop small-scale residential uses on site to provide housing for workforce in the area. As an example, as the way it's proposed, and I can go through the proposed language if you want, and it's in the staff report there for you. Commercial development that has a gross floor area of 15,000 square feet would be permitted up to 1,500 square feet to dedicate as workforce housing. The proposal states that up to 10% could be 10% of the floor area could be dedicated as workforce housing. Definition caps the size of a dwelling, but if built to the maximum 750 square foot that's proposed, could result in 2 residential units on the commercial site. All of the setbacks and lot coverage requirements would still apply, and any other zoning requirements that apply to the commercial zone that would be in place. Currently, we do allow apartments over permitted commercial uses as a special use permit. This definition that's proposed differs from what we currently allow, and that what's currently allowed as a special use permit has no size limit for the dwelling or for the overall square footage that can be used as a residential use. It also requires 1 additional parking space per bedroom. The proposal differentiates itself in that the dwelling is not required to be located over an existing commercial use, Instead, it could be located over or attached laterally or detached entirely from the structure on that commercial property. There's also no prohibitions on short-term rentals in the apartments that's in the current ordinance. The proposed language before you tonight would dictate that they couldn't be used for short-term rentals. During the planning board review, discussion did come up with the idea of also setting a minimum square footage for potential units. But ultimately, when the motion was made, there was no modifications to the language that was proposed. And the following policies and objectives relevant to the application in the adopted Campbell Land Use Plan. Policy 3.5 states encourage affordable and workforce housing in and around Kitty Hawk. Affordable and workforce units should be located within or near the invest and improve areas on the future land use map, which pretty much encompasses most of the commercial developments in town. Consider adjustments in dimensional requirements and density allowances to allow for additional housing types in some zoning districts. And consider increasing allowances for small-scale attached housing, i.e. duplexes, triplexes, or quadplexes, in some areas with performance design standards. The planning board reviewed this proposal at its May 16th meeting and unanimously recommended approval. The applicant is on hand. If you've got any questions for me or for him, I'll turn it over to the council at this point.
Thank you, Rob. Council, any questions for Rob, and then I'll ask the applicant to come up. Any questions? Okay. Would the applicant come up, please, sir? How are you doing?
Super, thank you.
Great, great.
For the record, my name is Ralph Calfee. I'm a property owner in Kitty Hawk. I think Rob has set it out. It's pretty straightforward. It's actually a relatively simple proposal. I don't think there's anything complicated about it. It's simply an effort to create an opportunity for commercial properties to include the development of limited workforce housing. Rather than trying to do a large project of 60 units jammed into a big old building somewhere that doesn't seem to be receiving too good a response locally, this would provide distributed workforce housing. It would do it on properties that are already commercially developed, and conceivably the folks in the workforce housing would be working in the commercial development that's on the property where they're housed. Rob mentioned the size limitation, so it prevents anything large or grandiose. At the planning board meeting, there was discussion about whether there should be a minimum size for these units. I did not introduce a minimum size. I wasn't trying to be restrictive, but on the other hand, I certainly have no objection to the notion of a minimum size. I personally am not a fan of trying to house workers in really minimal sized facilities and call it something that's going to be satisfactory, because I don't think it's an ideal solution. So at any rate, if you would choose to put a minimum size, I would have no problem with it. I don't have any more to add. I'd be glad to respond to any questions.
Council, any questions from Mr. Calfee?
I don't have any, well, maybe it is a question. First of all, I think this would be a neat way to maybe help Dare County with the existing housing issue that we have. If the council decided to modify this slightly to add a parking space per bedroom, would you be in agreement with that as a condition of this approval? Or is there a reason that you did not include requiring parking spaces for this?
Excuse me, first of all, I don't have to be in agreement. If you all decide that's what you're going to approve, it's what you approve, and I would either accommodate it or not. Secondly, the notion is that if we have workforce housing on the site, then that actually eliminates some of the transportation issues that we have for workers moving around. Conceivably, some of these workers will not have transportation. We're not saying who this is. Now, The reason I picked the size that I did is because in my discussion with commercial ventures, various types of ventures, there's an awful lot of singles and pairs in the workforce that don't have a place to live. So I'm not trying to develop housing for a couple with 2 kids or whatever. Just try to provide for, like I say, a single or a couple, maybe a couple with a small dependent. And I suspect that the amount of parking they need will be minimal, as well as that's kind of eliminating another parking space that would have been somewhere else. So to me, it shouldn't be essential. If you deem it essential, then you can.
Now, what you're saying to that would be if that person renting this unit worked at that particular facility, then that parking space would be a moot point.
Yeah, because
If they didn't work at this facility,
when they come there, they would have to bring a car and park. So, or if they work somewhere else, then they wouldn't necessarily have to move cars around. I just don't see this as being a driver of a major need for parking.
okay,
That answer you?
it does.
Okay.
I'm going to add on to that too. I mean, usually commercial property usually generally has plenty of parking anyway, correct?
It ain't never enough.
I understand that, but
But we do get all the parking on we can, because that's the only way we can satisfy the full use of the commercial property is to have a place to park.
well, you're required a certain amount of parking on commercial property is my point.
You have to have it anyway.
Correct. Okay, I'm done. I'm good.
All right, anybody else for Mr. Caffey? Thank you, Mr. Caffey.
Thank you.
Does anyone here would like to speak during this public hearing section? Come on up, Donna.
Good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Donna Creef, and I serve as the Government Affairs Director for the Outer Banks Association of Realtors. And each year, the association adopts public policy statements that we use to support issues at the local, state, and national level. And this amendment that you have in front of you tonight is consistent with the policies that OVAR has, and that it expands the opportunity for year-round housing, particularly for workforce housing. And so I encourage the board to adopt this amendment that Mr. Calvin has submitted. It gives flexibility for the business owners in Kitty Hawk, and it's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Ms. Crew, didn't the county have a similar standard in 2008?
Yes, sir, 2018.
18, I'm sorry. Right.
Anyone else like to speak during this public hearing section? Okay, if not, council, I'll entertain a motion to go back into regular session, please.
So moved.
Motion made by David, second.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, council, we're back in regular session. What would you like to do with this item?
I'm going to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed text amendment to add the definitions of accessory use workforce habitation and accessory workforce housing to section 42-1. As presented in this staff report, town council has found this proposal to be consistent with the town's adopted land use plan.
Thank you, Dave. Need a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you all. All right, Rob, you might as well stand right there. Council, I need a motion to go into public hearing regarding text amendment regarding minimum lot size, please.
So moved.
Motion made by David, second.
Second.
Second by Dylan. All in favor?
Aye.
We are in public hearing. Rob?
Right, for this one, as you can see in the staff report, it's proposed amendments to section 42-1, definitions, as well as 42-247, 248, 249, 273, 274, and 275, dealing with the various residential zoning districts. So the proposed change to the definition, you can see the existing definition, it adds a language saying all upland areas must be contiguous, and connected to meet minimum lot size requirements, except as provided by the various zoning districts. Then as you get into each of the zoning districts, for example, the BR1 district, 247D, the proposal adds, just to clarify, 15,000 square feet of uplands, and then it creates an exception saying that all upland areas must be continuous, contiguous, and connected to meet the minimum lot size requirements, except that for lots comprising a minimum area of 1 1/2 acres, upland shall not be required to be continuous, contiguous, and connected. That language is repeated throughout for the single-family residences. You can see in the BR2 district, 248D, for duplexes, our current ordinance requires a minimum lot size of 25,000 square feet for a duplex. The proposal here would create that exception for lots comprising a minimum of 2 acres of upland shall not be required to be continuous, contiguous, and connected. Then again with the multifamily dwellings, it's an 1.5 acres as well. So I guess the intent and the applicant is on hand here to answer questions as well. During the last public hearing for the minimum lot size, some concerns were brought up that requiring this 15,000 square feet to be continuous and connected could end up creating some unintended consequences. People will fill in some land to get that minimum square footage. This proposal would not change any of that for any lots that are smaller than 1.5 acres or 2 acres for duplexes, but it could potentially encourage a developer to do these larger lot subdivisions where they're not going to have to make that choice whether they want to disturb additional wetlands. They can get their 1.5 acre lots still, they'd still be able to, or they still have to have 15,000 square feet of uplands. It just wouldn't have to all be connected to one another on that particular lot. So the applicant is on hand to answer any specific questions on his proposal for that. The Campbell Land Use Plan states in policy 3.1 to manage land use and development to minimize primary and secondary impacts on resources and existing areas through standards for development. Policy 3.4, encourage residential that fits Kitty Hawk's character, maintain zoning regulations that protect the character of Kitty Hawk's neighborhoods. Policy 4.1, encourage the preservation of maritime forests, floodplains, marshes, and wetlands through development regulations and land protection initiatives. At the May 16th, 2024 planning board meeting, there was a split vote. This one recommended disapproval by a vote of 3-2. So I'll turn it over to council for any questions. I meant to point out in the last public hearing too, but all these ones that we have tonight are all legislative decisions. So it's really what council feels is in the best interest of the town. You're listening to public comment and staff report, the applicant, and you can use your judgment for that. For those of you who don't have to adhere to any standards or ordinance requirements for these type. Yeah, I'll turn it over to council.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions for Rob?
I may have one. One second, please. Under the multifamily dwellings, Rob, if I'm reading your language correctly, it says, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but marsh and wetland areas as determined by federal, state, and local agency regulations and areas waterward of the oceanfront vegetation line is determined by CAMA regulations may not be used. Is that defining CAMA wetlands or CAMA water? Because there's two different sides to that.
The way it's written, I read that as marsh and wetlands area as determined by CAMA regulations.
Okay. This guy's a little confusing because if it's a CAMA waterway, it can be sometimes.
Yeah, and that part of the language, it doesn't currently exist in the multifamily dwellings, but it's just copied language that has been under the single-family residence for before I got here.
Right, but now it's being included into multifamily.
Yes, I can let the applicant speak to that.
Okay, yeah.
I think the intent was to just have some continuity, have all the same language across the different zone, or not just zone district, but different dwelling types.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else have questions for Rob?
I will add, just as I was preparing the staff report and discussing with you that on this too, a trend that we've seen with proposals for development here lately is that despite what our minimum requirements say for density and lot size, or not just lot size, but the size of the developments, the amount of houses and all, if this were to get adopted and developer, they're not bound to do this, but it gives them the option. If they were to do this, it would create the lower density development, less houses in whatever particular area they're looking at subdividing. And in just my opinion, that seems to be on trend with the voices that we've heard during the most recent subdivision reviews and all, is that the density needs to be looked at. And this would, like I said, not require anybody to do these larger lot, low density developments, but it would give them maybe sort of an incentive and encouragement to do so.
But the key word is there, they don't have to.
Right.
Right. We all know how that can work sometimes in Dare County. So, okay.
All right, any more questions for Rob? Applicant is here, correct? Come on up, Mr. Campbell. It's your turn again, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you again for the record of Ralph Calfee of Kitty Hawk property owner. Probably it's as important on this one to talk about what it isn't as opposed to what it is. This does not propose to void your most recent adoptions of 15,000 square feet of continuous, contiguous uplands, et cetera. What it says is, as an alternative, if you choose not to follow that option, you can go with larger size lots. And so the intent of this is to see if developers will take the opportunity to avoid the difficult process that could occur for the 15,000 contiguous and instead have larger lots with lower density. They'd still be required to have the 15,000 square feet of uplands, but they wouldn't necessarily be contiguous, but the lots would be substantially larger. This, at the planning board, there was a question as to whether this is just some kind of a workaround to get around the 15,000 square feet contiguous thing. And in my view, it absolutely is not, because I think that larger lots at the lower density development is not a workaround, not a workaround, it is a worthwhile alternative. And I think this ordinance can give a developer incentive to do just that and to subdivide larger lots. It's a long ordinance amendment simply because each one of the districts has requirements for single family, for duplex, for multifamily, and all of that. The concept is always the same. If it's single family, you want to use the alternative approach, your lot size is going to be a minimum of 1.5 acres. If it's a duplex, let me be sure I get it right, whatever the number is, Rob, what is it? 2 acres.
2 acres.
2 acres instead of 1.5 acres. And then multifamily is a little more complicated because the way it's written, you have acreage attached to each of the units. So this does that in the same format, but once again, it increases the acreage associated with each one of the units. So it's consistent in that respect throughout. Also, I would add, I am not doing this for any particular client. I have not researched any property in Kitty Hawk to see exactly what the impact would be of doing this. But I am of the belief that there are a lot of properties remaining in Kitty Hawk where this is potentially a way to do subdivisions that would in fact result in lower density. I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Calfee?
Another one for Rob. On the multifamily zoning, was it 4 units per acre that we allow for multifamily? do you feel that the way this is written hurts that? I'm still stuck on the camera part.
Multifamily is kind of like, it's close to 4 units per acre. The arithmetic is kind of odd. That gives you different,
I'm aware.
yeah, the bottom line, it was 4 units to the acre. And then, my recollection here is we go into basically following the same rationale, an acre and a half for a single family and 2 acres for a duplex. So in the multifamily, as you expand, the number of units, you would then also increase the acreage required.
And as far as density go, like the 4 dwellings per acre, the maximum density that we allow in the BR3 district. I don't think this would have much effect on that. Like, we're not looking at a specific site on this, but our definitions, when we calculate density, we're looking at non-wetland area by definition anyway. So
Correct, but that's still the one district you can use wetlands to count for overall area. You can still use whether it be Army Corps on one side and Camel on the other, doesn't matter. If you have 3 acres of uplands and you got 5 acres of wetlands, you can still combine that to make 8 in multifamily. Correct?
I'd say closer to that.
Okay. That's my interpretation of our ordinance. So,
I can check on it and get back to you on that, but in 42.1, under the definition of density, I think it is, it lays out that it's, I don't have the exact wording in front of me, but it's,
Sure.
it's upland area that we're looking at to calculate density.
okay. I'm good.
Any more questions for Mr. Calfee? Is anyone here tonight would like to speak during this public hearing section? Come on up, sir. State your name, please. You get 5 minutes during public hearing.
It won't take that.
All right.
Joanne, on 4721 West Second Street. I didn't come here originally to speak about this, but I can offer that professionally I have looked at properties exactly like what Ralph has described, where you have 8,000 square feet of uplands and 7,000 square feet of uplands and separate upland hummocks. In fact, all of you that are familiar with Kitty Hawk Village and the lay of land, and we've got these ridges separated by swamps and ridges by swamps. We have lots on Overcoat that are 3,000 square feet. We can fit 3-bedroom houses on there on that 3,000 square feet. You have an 8,000 square foot upland hummock, you can fit a house on there, you can fit a drain field on there, you can fit everything. You make it have to be contiguous. You make me connect that 8,000 to that 7,000, I've got to go to the Corps to get a permit to fill a strip of land between those and make them contiguous. But if you allow an alternative where someone can make a larger lot size that's greater in size, and I can leave those separate and develop them, maybe connect them with a wooden footbridge or something like that to get use of that property, you're not forcing me to impact those wetlands and that natural resource. And so I very strongly support what Ralph has proposed. I think it's a really good idea. It gives a developer an alternative, and I can tell you now professionally, I am looking at several properties where this is relevant.
I'm going to have something on that too. So as long as that wetland does not connect to an open body of water, you don't have to go get a fill permit anymore by Army Corps.
So
Because I know all about
Sackett
Open
versus
Creek as
the
an
EPA
example.
settled that isolated wetlands are not the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers, provided that they are not connected to
Correct.
a navigable body of water.
Right.
That sounds like a simple thing, but it's not. The Corps will try to claim jurisdiction over things that you would think are not connected. But for example, there are places in Kitty Hawk that connect through a wetland to an open ditch to something on Moore Shore Road. It connects all the way out to Kitty Hawk Bay, and they're going to claim jurisdiction over that. And so it's not as clear cut as, you know, the federal government, the Supreme Court ruling was unanimous. The federal government divested their interest in monitoring isolated pockets of wetlands. The state of North Carolina followed with Farm Bill 2023 and said, we also aren't going to get involved in it. But, so it sounds simple. Isolated pocket, you can fill by right, is the way I interpret it. Unfortunately, I'm not an attorney, and I don't get to make that call. But the Corps has to come in and make a jurisdictional determination about something they don't have jurisdiction over anymore.
So I'm in the business as well. My conversation with Army Corps official is if I can walk around that pocket of wetlands and not touch water, it can be filled.
So when we delineate wetlands, if you delineate a loop and it closes upon itself, like what you described, you can walk around it, to me, that's isolated. Sometimes, though, you have a loop that hits a property line and you don't have the right to continue to follow it out. So that isolated call becomes a little bit more muddy.
I agree with that.
So, yeah, I tell my clients, if that loop closes, that delineator ties those flags in a loop, you can fill it by right. That's what I tell them. But I tell them they're taking a risk in doing it without getting a jurisdictional determination from the Corps. Because in doing so, they don't have that cover that claim of no jurisdiction gives them. So, but we can debate that all night. And I only have a minute, 22 seconds left, so that's all I got.
We can debate it, but here's where I'm going with it. Like, I'm not saying I'm for or against it because there are certain cases where you have to use common sense. But I'm not in favor of filling here to the bypass to get something done. So,
I understand. I just see, for the clients that I represent, if the rule says the wetland shall be contiguous, then they're either existing as contiguous in some way they connect, or we make it. And there's a nationwide permit series, 18 for a tenth of an acre, 14 for driveways. We can go get a permit, fill those wetlands, impact that natural resource, pay a wetland bank somewhere else for the wetland credits, and move on. But that's an expensive exercise. And if you can give a developer an alternative to avoid that and preserve that wetland as a natural resource, then why not do that? That's all I want to say about it.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak at this public hearing? Okay, council, if no further questions, I need a motion to go back into regular session, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Jeff, second. Second by Straw. All in favor? Aye. All opposed. Okay, we are back in regular session on item 7B. Council? Discussion, entertain a motion.
I'll discuss. I understand that the intent of this is to encourage larger lots. But what I see with it is I disagree a little bit on that, in that it encourages utilizing a bunch of wetlands, which is a lot of what we have in Kitty Hawk, to eliminate or to reverse the text amendment that we recently passed, go right back to where we used to be. That's all I have to say.
Well, here we are with the continuous, contiguous, and connected again. I think we knew this may be an issue.
Look, I'm in favor of it in certain instances. What I'm not in favor of is just being some wide open, endless thing. I have paid more mitigation bank money than I ever care to admit to. I get there's a purpose behind it, but to me it's just too wide open. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying there's not cases where it should be done and can be done. I did 17 lots behind Howard's Pub with it. Worked fine. So I understand there's a place to do that. I just don't, I think it's too wide open for me. I may stand alone in this, but that's just how I feel about it.
Okay.
I think there's good merit behind what's being asked.
If somebody has a 2-acre lot or an 1.5 acre lot, and they go to get a permit, is the field property exempt from the uplands, the 15,000 square feet of uplands?
You mean field to connect it? Rob?
Is it exempt? Is it taken out?
Did you say it one more time?
If somebody has the larger lot and they go to get a permit and they have field area on their lot, that does not count towards upland. Is that true, or it should be?
Right, yeah, there's nothing in the proposal or the adopted language from a few months ago that would prevent somebody from getting fill brought in before coming in for a subdivision. So they could get whatever permits necessary from the Army Corps, get their filled area to meet that 15,000 square feet and get their...
15,000 feet that they've filled is used as part of the 15,000 square feet.
Yes, it can be used towards that calculation.
So maybe to help Councilman Walker, if somebody has say they have 15,000 square foot lot in, I don't know, Bob Perry Road, and all things considered with the Army Corps, and you can walk around it, there's no leading to Kitty Hawk Bay, somebody can go in there and just fill that, then come to Robin, it's a 15,000 square foot lot.
And
correct?
Right, and with the proposal that you've got in front of you tonight, nothing would change with that. They could still do that and get their smaller lot subdivisions. This, as the applicant was explaining, like it provides an outlet to where instead of getting these fill permits and filling here and filling there and coming up with 15,000 square foot lots, they come in with a subdivision plat with no fill being shown and they do 10 lots or 8 lots or as long as they're over an acre and a half in size.
Right, but if it's still not connected to a body of water and there's wetlands there, somebody can still and will go fill that, then come see you after it's filled.
Sure, but
It happens all the time.
right, but it's kind of separate from what we're talking about.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for myself to make sure that is a little bit different.
Right. I mean, if somebody comes in with these acre and a half lots and they've got, whatever, 10,000 square feet here, 5,000, then what they do after, somebody sells the lot and they start developing it and get whatever permits they need, then, Army Corps permits, we're not going to have any say in that. But what this is doing is saying that instead of doing all that fill ahead of time and breaking out, instead of having, 25 lot subdivision, they're breaking these down into acre and a half lots. So they're going to have, the same acreage, they'll have maybe 8 lots, 9 lots. And again, it's not anything that would be required of it. And, like I said, it's just providing a developer an option. They could still do 15,000 square foot lots and have, I think it's 2 dwelling per acre if we're in the village, or 4 dwellings per acre out here. It just gives an alternative.
I've never asked this question, but I'm gonna ask it. How does staff feel about this text amendment?
I think it makes sense. Like I said, and it came up during the planning board. I mentioned it was a 3-2 vote. Well, it was actually a motion to approve, and that vote failed 2-3, and then motion to deny. Right. But one of the board members brought up, like, what's the downside? Like, we're not requiring anybody to do these larger lots. They still have the option of doing 15,000 square foot of uplands, which is what is required now. But like I said, it gives them the option to do a larger lot, and rather than fill in as much as they can get permits to do to get these the necessary uplands to do the subdivision, they are encouraged to more work with what they've got and do a larger lot, lower density development.
But isn't our objective to protect the wetlands?
Yes.
So I think, maybe I'm being simple about this, perhaps, I don't know.
I like that.
So I look at it as requiring, if you want to be exempt, the only thing we're exempting really is the requirement of continuous, connected, and what's the other C word?
Contiguous.
Contiguous, okay, continuous, contiguous, and
I
connected.
say it in my sleep.
So, in the idea, I think, behind the amendment, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, though, is to prevent the filling of the wetlands, to create that land bridge, if you will, by exempting a larger lot from the requirement of connectivity. So that's just simple. Does that make any sense to anybody?
Is this the same meeting that you gave your recommendation on during the planning board, or is this one of these other ones we're going to go through?
If I was there, I probably gave a reg day off and ask. And I think it makes sense. I think that there was concern when we first passed the amendment here at council level requiring the 3 Cs. I think there was concern when seeing that diagram and hearing folks talk about how disrupting wetlands and diverting water flow and things of that nature could be a very bad thing and an unintended consequence. And all this does, in my mind at least, is it provides the alternative without undoing the original concept. You're just encouraging something larger in exchange for a larger lot in exchange for not having to connect the uplands to the
And disturb the natural.
and disturb, right. So the density issue is still achieved, but it's just an alternative.
Okay, you good, Charlotte? You good, Charlotte? With that? Okay, good.
So with this, if I have a 750 square foot hammock and 750 square foot hammock, I'm considered to have the 15,000 square feet?
Only if, remember, we're looking at 1 acre lots, for example. Okay, they're still going, in the given district, they're still going to have to meet the continuous connected, the 3 Cs requirement. However, if that same lot you just described is at least 1.5 acres, or 2 acres for multifamily, I think, then the connectivity wouldn't be required, but there again, you've got a much larger surface area as far as what's being developed, as far as what the lot boundaries would be.
But the CAMA would be used as that area also. So like if the hammock, so if you had a hammock, and then you had the big square, but you only had the 2 clumps in there. All of the marshlands, all going to be included, and so now you're still going to be able to develop on 2 little hammocks.
Well, I suppose.
But a big lot of wetland.
If those areas are actually capable of being developed, I don't.
And it would be one
but I do
lot,
see what
so
you're saying.
it wouldn't
I do see what
be
you're saying.
developed for, several, multiple parcels. You could have the 7,500 square foot and 7,500 square foot here, but it's all in one lot. So you could do one house and under current regulations an ADU, but you're not putting, several lots on that square footage.
You're not filling it to get to that several.
Right.
But this is touching on my concern is if you're able to utilize a bunch of wetlands, then the uplands now become the same density that we voted to not go with.
I think the size requirement that he has on there, that the applicant has on for the minimum to be eligible for this proposed exemption with 1.5 acres. So we're 43,560 is an acre. So, rather than looking at, we're just going back to how it was, like, I think 15,000 square foot of uplands, if they're able to fill certain amounts here, certain amounts there to get it, 15,000 square feet, that would be almost 3 lots per acre if it's all uplands. So I don't think it's quite getting back at the same density.
It's slightly different than
Yeah.
the last time. I think.
Granted, you're not going to get permits to fill a full 15,000 square feet or anything, but I think the minimum lot size that's being proposed, I think, is large enough that we're not really wading back into like undoing what was done a couple months ago.
I think it's a little different.
And I guess I have to look into the logistics of it also, but like, you know, if somebody wanted to go this route, if this gets approved and do 1.5 acre lots, and they've got the pockets of uplands, and as part of the subdivision approval, I think it could be restricted in that it would not be eligible to be subdivided further down the road. Like that 1.5 acres would be an 1.5 acres. You're not gonna, 2 years down the road, the current owner come in and say, oh, I'm gonna fill here and turn this into 3 lots. Like, I think we could restrict that.
Thank you for saying that. That's what I don't want to see happen.
And, I mean, Casey, correct me if I'm
No,
wrong, but I think
you're
we
correct.
could do that.
If you're creating more lots at any point in time, then we're falling under our subdivision ordinance, which is gonna be subject to regulation. So as you said, yes, we could hold them to that.
Like, I don't want to see somebody's got 5,000 square foot of uplands and the rest is all wet and not be able to build a house on it. That's
Right.
right?
Right, well,
But I don't want to see it subdivided either.
under
I mean,
either the current language or this proposal, if you only got 5,000 square feet of uplands, you're not creating a lot out of it. Because this doesn't create an exemption from the 15,000 square feet, just the 15,000 square feet of contiguous.
And whatever the other
Yeah.
2 Cs are.
So either way, you gotta have 15,000 square feet of upland to create a lot,
Okay, maybe that was a bad example. You got 15,001.
right?
Yeah. Okay, Council. Any further questions or discussion? Good discussion. I'll entertain a motion. Dave, you want to make a motion?
Me?
You're the one that had the most discussion. so-
I know, I mean, I just think it could be a little bit different written in some areas, but, Mr. Mayor, I'll defer back to you. Again, Rob, you think this is not, you think this proposal is not detrimental to the town?
I don't think so, no. I think it makes sense to me.
All right, if it makes sense,
Have that option for next
I mean, I have faith in the planning director, and if he feels like it's not gonna hurt anything, then I'm gonna have to support my planning director.
all right.
So, let's see here, which one is it?
Last page. You mean to make it?
Sure.
I move to approve the proposed text amendment to the definition of minimum lot size, section 42-1, and relevant district regulations as presented in this staff report. Town council has found this proposal to be consistent with the town's adopted land use plan. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Charlotte. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
All right.
One no.
2.
We got 2.
Two opposed.
All right. Motion passed. 3 in favor, 2 opposed. 2 nays. Thank you, Council. Okay. Item 7C, text amendment, accessory dwelling units. I need a motion to go back into public hearing. Motion made by Charlotte, second.
Second.
Second by Dylan. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are in public hearing. Rob?
All right, this text amendment has 2 portions to it. The first in 42-1 definitions. It proposes to define long-term tenant as a person or persons using a dwelling unit for living, sleeping, cooking, or eating purposes for a period of 31 or more continual days. The second part of it is under section 42-528, which is our language that regulates our accessory dwelling units. That language states that, it says, in addition to the requirements of section 42-528A through G, the following shall apply to ADUs located within the DR1 zoning district. The first regulation being that accessory dwelling units located in the VR1 zoning district shall have a long-term tenant or owner residing in a dwelling on the subject property as defined in section 42-1 and subsection I, properties located in the VR1 district with an existing accessory dwelling unit as of, I guess it would be July 1st if it's approved tonight, and having no long-term resident or owner on the subject property shall have a period of 12-month period to finalize conversion and compliance. I think the accessory dwelling unit language was first adopted into our ordinance in 2018, I believe, and I think this is probably the fourth or fifth time we've been revisiting it with different proposals to add or subtract stuff from it. This one, I guess mentioned in the staff report, it specifically deals with the VR1 zoning district. So any other zones, these two proposals would not apply to it. The gist of it, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. It's regulating that if you're in that VR1 district and you've got an accessory dwelling unit on your property, either that ADU or the primary residence would have to be occupied by a long-term tenant. So essentially, there's a handful in town that have both the primary dwelling and the ADU being used as short-term rentals. That would prohibit that and any future ones that are permitted. And that second part of it would require that any of those existing ones, again, I think it's 3 that I'm aware of, within 12 months of adoption, they would have to be brought into compliance to where one of the structures would have to be occupied by a long-term occupant. Let's see, the relevant policies and objectives in the land use plan. Policy 3.1 states manage land use and development to minimize primary and secondary impacts on resources and existing residents through standards for development. Policy 3.4, encourage residential that fits Kitty Hawk's character, maintain zoning regulations that protect the character of Kitty Hawk's neighborhoods, monitor trends and reduce impacts of accessory dwelling units and short-term rentals in the village residential zoning districts. Current regulations allow ADUs as long as lot coverage and other standards are followed. Consider modifications to design requirements that could include additional setbacks or buffering in the VR districts, especially if the unit is accessed via a separate driveway. Policy 3.5, encourage affordable and workforce housing in and around Kitty Hawk. I added that one in there being that, if this goes into effect, it's obviously gonna have an effect on the housing stock available for long-term residents. How much of an effect that's potentially right now 3 or 4 properties, but this would also affect any future accessory dwelling units permitted in the coming years and months. So it could have an effect there. Goal 11, encourage an adequate supply of affordable and workforce housing stock to serve the needs of year-round residents. Policy 11.1, evaluate targeted actions to enhance the amount of housing available for year-round residents. And policy 11.3, consider incentives or other actions for keeping housing used as long-term rentals. The planning board reviewed this at their May meeting and citing a concern with the requirement that the existing non-conforming properties would be required to be brought into compliance within 12 months, a motion was made to recommend denial of the proposed text amendment. That motion failed by a vote of 2 to 3. After that, a motion was made to approve as it is presented tonight, and that motion passed 3 to 2. So it comes with a recommendation of approval. The applicant is on hand for this one as well, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if I can't answer them, I'll let the applicant answer.
Rob, just for the record, on the front page for council has it, but just for the public's use, can you read the definition of long-term rental, please?
The proposed definition for the long-term tenant?
Yes, sir.
Means a person or persons using a dwelling unit for living, sleeping, cooking, and eating purposes for a period of 31 or more continual days.
Okay, thank you. make sure everyone's aware. Any questions for Rob?
And I was just going to say, I will note that during discussions with the applicant, the current concern that came up with the planning board regarding the 12-month compliance, typically when we have, or when we find a non-conforming use in town, or we create a non-conforming use by changing the ordinance, those non-conforming uses are kind of grandfathered. They're allowed to continue until that use stops for a period of 12 months or more, and then any subsequent use has to comply with current regulations. The applicant did point out, my concern that I had was the legality of requiring being brought into compliance after 12 months. Chapel Hill, they have an ordinance, a very thorough ordinance on short-term rentals, and they did put in theirs that they had, I believe it was 18 months for existing short-term rentals to be brought into compliance. I don't know if there's been any
I looked into
that chapel or
that
that ordinance has
today.
been in court.
I thought it may be a question, so I went to the Court of Appeals, and that was one of the items being attacked, along with requiring owner occupancy. The second time that ordinance I went to the Court of Appeals, the first one settled, and I suppose revisions were made. I'm not sure actually what happened in the first suit. Just as of last week, I think it was 6/23, the Court of Appeals, there was a form filed. It did mediate while on appeal, and there was some form of settlement reached between whoever sued the town of Chapel Hill. I don't know the details yet, but the appeal was dismissed. Now, that doesn't mean that the ordinance is going to be, it's not going to be changed. Part of the agreement could have been that the Board of Commissioners was going to entertain something different than what's currently written. I don't know. I don't have the details because, again, it was settled, and we'll know more about what happened to Chapel Hill in the future.
Okay.
But many of the others ordinances that I had read had clauses that specifically allowed for grandfathering, and maybe, Rob, I don't know if you viewed any others either that required compliance as opposed to grandfathering the current existing properties as they're operating.
So these folks that have built these properties in compliance with the town of Kitty Hawk's code, zoning regulations, whatever, correct? I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse. I'm good with somebody having to live there. I don't think it's right for people to put just two of them on one lot and just rent them. I'm okay with that. I have a problem with telling somebody that they built something in compliance by following the ordinance we had in place and telling them that they have 12 months to convert that unit over to a year-round rental. And I think it sets the town up for a lawsuit. But I'll defer that to Casey.
I have a question, it's probably going to be for both, okay? So I went back and I wanted to find out what is permitted by use in a VR1.
By right, Jeff? Sorry.
And the only thing is a detached single-family dwelling, not to include mobile home, manufactured home, customary accessory buildings, private swimming pools, tennis courts, private piers and boat slips, town-owned and leased facilities. Everything else is a special use permit. So at what point was short-term Airbnbs allowed as a permitted use in the VR1? When did council allow this?
Kind of always, because we've never defined it as a land use. So until we define it as a land use, we can't say where it can and can't go.
So there was this case, I think it was in Wilmington, the Schroeder, and that's exactly what the Court of Appeals and perhaps even affirmed at Supreme Court level said. Short-term rentals can be regulated. Now bear in mind, this particular ordinance doesn't seek to define short-term rentals. We're talking about long-term rentals. But if you want to regulate short-term rentals, it's not enough to say, that's basically what the case said. It's not enough to say, well, our ordinance doesn't have it as a permitted and or special use. You actually have to go in and define short-term rental in your ordinance in order to regulate any facet of a short-term rental. So the answer, like Rob said, is the fact that our ordinance is currently silent on short-term rentals, that's why they're.
Well, maybe I'm not going short-term, just the fact that it's an Airbnb, a business being run in a VR with no conditions of the number of parking places. I can go in to find Airbnb, a bread and breakfasts. Why does a man to have a bread and breakfast have to live there, have to require a parking place? Only a certain amount of people. What gives the Airbnb the free reign to run a business however they want them, as many people as they want in these, without some kind of regulation by this town council to protect the people in a VR1?
And we could, if we had the definition, my answer to that, I guess, would be, as far as from a business or a corporate, North Carolina law doesn't look at renting your property as running a business out of your property.
Airbnb?
Airbnb is we gotta keep in mind, Airbnb is
Or any
the
of
corporate.
that. But
So-
any-
Conglomerate.
And I
It's
think,
not
in
it's
case,
not the
correct
actual
me,
use being made by a particular
Nightly
owner.
correct me if I'm wrong, but like, if we're talking about short-term rentals, so whether it's Airbnb, or property management that has an office here that manages all those, or if I personally own a house and I privately run it as a short-term rental and do my bookings through Craigslist, if we want to regulate Airbnb, we got to regulate all of them the same, because they're all
True,
short-term
yeah,
rentals.
That's very true as well.
Well, let me ask you a question.
We can set, if we define them and set different regulations for different districts, we can do that, like have, different set of regulations for short-term rentals in the VR1 versus the BR1, because I don't think we want to mess with it over
So
here.
more to Jeff's point then, so then, how many do we have in the VR1 right now?
Short-term rentals? Don't know, I don't have that
Probably
information.
hard to find out, right? Let's go to Airbnb. So moving forward,
Well, are you talking about Airbnbs or short-term rentals?
well, see, I don't like to use the word Airbnb. It's a short-term rental is what it is.
Right.
Airbnb is a platform.
Right.
All right. just
That's
like
what I said, we have to
everybody
look at
else.
them the same as the rental
Correct.
companies here and private rentals and what have you.
I have no issue getting behind anybody moving forward not being allowed to do that. If you want to rent it nightly, then you just don't build it, right? But when somebody's already done it by right, that's not right for us to come in and tell them they can't do it. And I may stand alone on that, but that's how I feel about that. Now, to Jeff's point, do we create an ordinance that says you can't do that, so it doesn't happen again?
That's the direction we would need to go. I know that's not what Jeff's proposing, though. I think, Jeff, you were kind of taking the business angle
Well,
of it, right?
okay, say I have a dock. Just all of a sudden I say, well, man, I'm gonna build me 4 boats. I'm just gonna start renting them. What's the difference in me building a house and starting to rent it? Well, at what point do I have to come and get a permit?
It's a good question, but, right, but I mean, right
They
now.
come stand at the dock. I mean,
But right now, though, see, that would be the leasing of personalty, things of that nature. Right now, as far as realty is concerned, which is obviously what we're talking about, North Carolina law doesn't look at that as the owner of the property performing a commercial exercise, which, so in other words, it's not a home occupation, it's none of that.
What's no
It's just
different than
not-
a 25-bedroom house? It
Right.
should be considered a motel.
Correct. The
Right.
state's not giving us any guidelines or leeway
but that wouldn't
to
be in a
come in and-
VR1. But see, once again, we're talking about VR1, not right down the street in VR2. We're talking about where it clearly says here, in my opinion, that is all that's permitted. Everything else that was done without coming to the town and asking permission, to me, it's never been approved to be grandfathered.
And if they were doing something other than simply residing in a residential property, I'd agree. But that is in essence what these folks are doing. No matter if they have weekly rentals, three-day rentals, overnight rentals, the use is still residential. They're still living in a piece of real estate. And that's where, and what you were just saying with the 25-bedroom homes, if they were to go and take those type homes and say, if the state were to say, okay, here's a commercial, this is what constitutes commercial, and these 22-bedroom mini hotels fall into the commercial, totally different. Now it's a business, perhaps. Or just form a hybrid of residential versus commercial. Maybe it's a component of two. They've not given us anything, and we can't usurp, we can't create things that the state hasn't given us the right to create, which puts us back in residential world. And that's the use. The use is living.
when somebody comes here and they say, well, look, I'm interested in buying a piece of property in the VR1, I'm sure that they probably got the same thing I did when I asked for it. Where in here is telling them that that can be next door to them?
It doesn't say that it can't.
Well, I've always heard that if
The
it's,
problem.
ever since I was on the planning board and since here, if it's not permitted, it's prohibited until it's permitted.
And we've got a either Court of Appeals and affirmed by the Supreme Court, but there is finite case law on that exact issue involving short-term rentals. And if it doesn't say it, we can't regulate it.
That's why
So-
I think we need to create a definitive ordinance that prevents it.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for or against, obviously. My job is just to tell you what's legal and what's not.
Because Jeff, I do agree with you. But I mean, if you don't have an ordinance and, I mean,
You have to, you have to define it as a use, actual short-term rentals, and then you've got to incorporate your regulations using that definition. And we don't even have the definition of a short-term rental at this point.
because I mean, I have rentals around me and I can't stand it. I get it.
I get it too.
So I understand.
I don't have any more for you.
Any more questions for all? All right, the applicant here, I see me. Come on up, ma'am. How are you this evening? Good.
My name is Amy Wells, and I live at 3749 Herbert Perry Road. We started asking for some help regarding this probably 4 or 5 years ago. And so there was some discussion, not much was done, but I'm so glad that we've gotten to the point where there can be some discussion because the town really needs to do something in regards to defining short-term rentals, long-term rentals, vacation rentals. However, the town does have a residential definition that does exist. Some other people said, well, it doesn't apply, but are any of you familiar with the residential definition? It says that it is used, dwelling is used for living residential purposes by exclusively one family. That is the town's definition. It's not mine, but it gives definition to the residential neighborhoods and areas in Kitty Hawk. Maybe we haven't been applying that definition, but that doesn't mean that it just exists. As you said, it has to be there. The residential definition is there. If you might need to add short-term vacation, I'm not sure. But so these other types of rentals were never permitted by definition. They've just occurred. I think some is just not the fault of the planning or town. It's just occurred because you've had this rampant rise in Airbnb and these other platforms that made this much more available to homeowners and rentals. And, you know, I have an Airbnb, so I understand, I get it. I don't have it, you know, where there's multiple ones on lots. And that is where the real problem comes in, is if you've had people to come in and build these multiple units on one lot. And so it creates problems in our residential neighborhoods. That said, when you go, short-term rentals are mentioned in the town code. I've spent a lot of time in the last year. It's taken me, I went to several different planning board meetings. I've talked to the planning board, talked to the realtors, I've talked to a lot of different people. So short-term rentals are mentioned in the town code. They're only mentioned, they're not even mentioned out for the beach areas. So they're nowhere except for the bed and breakfast. And that is the only place that they're allowed in the town code. And there is a bed and breakfast ordinance that addresses short-term rentals. It also has a lot of other requirements for you to have a bed and breakfast with short-term rentals. It means there's an owner on site, management is on site, and so there's other parking requirements and handicap bathrooms. But there is a definition in the town code for short-term rentals. Or it mentions short-term rentals, I'll say that. The other thing is, I think the town is going to have to consider, in the grandfathering clause, if it was never permitted in the residential, then it's prohibited. I don't think this is a grandfathering issue because it was never really allowed. And so I don't understand why you have to let one person who may have just developed his property according to what he wanted to do and uses it as he wanted to do. I just don't think it's fair for you to allow him and then restrict everybody else. So with that said, it's a difficult issue. Towns are grappling with it everywhere. Chapel Hill has done something in regards to the grandfathering clause or making those existing when they are harming the neighborhoods with just heavy traffic and use, to have them to go back and give them time. They can still rent their place. They still get a good amount of money for a long-term rental. And so the place can be used for rentals. It's just not the short-term rentals that they might currently have. The other thing I think you need to consider is that you spend 1,000 times more time in your street and within 5 blocks of your home than you do anywhere else in your town or city. That means that's your small neighborhood and your town. So when you're thinking about the importance of your neighborhood and the area in which you live, it becomes extremely important for the town to think about these neighborhoods as places that are really make a big impact on your life and your happiness. You spend 1,000 more times there than you do anywhere else in your town or city. So I realize it's a complicated issue. It's taken me a year to even get to council. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I'm glad to answer.
Listen, I want to be clear. I totally support what you're trying to do. Just last night, I about asked our law enforcement to come stop people shooting fireworks off the deck beside my house. I understand it. And I'm all about stopping it moving forward. What concerns me is, the only part that concerns me about anything in here is telling somebody that they have to convert in 12 months.
Well, you can make it 18 months. You can make it 2 years if you want.
Right.
But he still gets to rent his house. It's just not short-term, it's long-term. And he may make just as, I think you make 20 or 30% more, maybe 30% more money on short-term. So I realize that can be a big impact.
Which I think that's declining. As a matter of fact, it is
I do
declining.
think you're right.
It is
So I don't
declining.
think it will be,
It's going to take care of itself eventually.
I know, so it'll be about the same. So I don't know that you're really impacting him, whereas he is having a tremendous impact on our neighborhood. I can't even we've got a lot of new police cars. I cannot get anybody to stop the speeding down our road. It is rampant. And so it's a problem. And we also have this guy that has 2 separate developments. He has 4 vacation rentals. We now have somebody else on our street, so there's another one on our street. And I don't know where the third one comes from. We have 3 on our street, and I think you mentioned another one. So now there's somebody else. So, I mean, it's coming, and they're going to be everywhere. So
At the end of your street, the one that's down all the way on the right, he's using both of those as rentals, isn't he?
there's 4 of them that he has down
Right,
there.
but he's not living in any of it, I don't think, is he?
When he first started, he built the first 2. He lived or he said he was using it for his use. So, I mean, it sort of alarmed us, but it was okay. But then the next thing we knew, he had lived there for a while, and then he changed it to where he rents both of them. So when he first started, it was a residential home with an ADU. And the other thing is ADUs, I don't see anywhere in there other than home occupation that you can really, that it's a permitted use for short-term rentals. It says home occupation. And it also says in there, talking about what is not written, it says ADUs will not be used for business or commercial use. Now, I know there's some question as to, is short-term rentals. But there's also a court case in Pennsylvania, I think it was done, not in North Carolina, but it said, and it was decided at the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, that short-term rentals were not residential use. Vacation rentals were not residential use of property. So maybe that might mean anything for North Carolina,
I
but
think there's a case in Wilmington too, was there not? I've not heard about it, but I believe there's a big lawsuit in Wilmington over this exact same thing.
That was the one, however, I don't think they really addressed whether or not it was a business or not. Well, permitting now, requiring of permits and business licenses, one of the two.
I mean, nightly rentals.
But then short-term rentals, that was the case that said, at least one case out of Wilmington, is where you gotta define it if you wanna regulate it. That was also an issue.
and that said, I don't think this ordinance hurts anybody that may have a short-term rental in an ADU. I tried not to do that. We tried to find out every way to accommodate most everybody. So it does allow anybody that has an existing ADU as a short-term rental, they can continue that use as long as there is a long-term resident on site. So that's what we were trying to do.
I have worked years on the county planning board, working on these exact issues of trying to find long-term housing, not Airbnbs or VRBOs, but how do we address housing? In fact, I remember maybe a few years ago, we even increased lot coverage size to accommodate. So if you had one that you were renting nightly, you could do another one, but it had to be for a year-round person. I completely agree with what you're trying to do. Believe me, I got it on both sides of me, I understand. A little different in the fact that they're homes, not accessory dwelling units, but they're rental properties. I want to do whatever we can to help solve this issue, but I would feel a lot better if we had an ordinance that we created that says no more moving forward, and then putting a stop to it that way, especially in the VR1.
How did you come up with the 12 months, Ms. Wells? Because I'll be honest, if that is in it, I cannot support it. I cannot support this text amendment with that in it.
Well, with one reason, and maybe I didn't give them enough time, but that Chapel Hill says 18 months. And I think they started out maybe with something less, but they changed it to 18 months. And I felt like whatever they're doing in Chapel Hill, would be pretty reasonable. I just thought, well, it gives somebody, they usually book them a year in advance. So I just thought it would give anybody that had their rental program in place in a year in advance, it would give them time to go through the full year cycle of rentals. Like I said, you can make it 2 years. The point is just not to have a cottage court
Right.
next door in a residential neighborhood, and that's what it is.
That is essentially what it turns into.
I
You're
agree
exact-
with David exactly. He supports it, I support it, I understand your reason.
But it's
But the
not,
12
it was
month
never allowed. Cottage courts were never supposed to be allowed
Yeah.
in the residential VR1 neighborhoods in Kitty Hawk.
I don't agree with telling someone that they have to convert it in 12 months.
But he did it where it's not permitted.
So
That's all I have to
where's it not, where did he do it not permitted at? You mean as far as having the two properties on one lot that he's no longer living in?
I don't see where the ADU ordinance, it says that, it says it can be used for home occupations and not for business use. What was your question again? You said
Well, I
where
mean,
does he?
it's not really a cottage court. It can, now where you're talking about where he's got the two here and two there, that kind of could be a cottage court in a way.
Right, that's right.
I support every single thing you're doing right now, minus the 12 months.
me too.
I
Do
understand.
you have it? Is there a date or just grandfather them forever? Is there,
I don't, I think I would like to have more direct legal, what word am I looking for? Definitive legal.
Precedents?
And that came up, is it legal?
And that currently, with what happened, that Chapel Hill case, I think if it had come to finality in the Court of Appeals and we had the judges, the 3 judges rule, I think we would know. Right now, because it was settled, I don't know. There's no precedence out there for us to.
I think there's other towns that have there's other towns that have done it. It's
There
like,
may be. Most of the ones I read allowed for, they specifically stated any current uses being made of this nature are grandfathered. But I'm not saying there's not others out, because I obviously didn't read all 300 municipalities' regulations.
But if North Carolina has not given a definitive answer as to what that is,
I've got a lot of heartburn with it.
you have heartburn with 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to just know my legal opinion, that's it. I think that,
Do you have just as much heartburn with 18 months mimicking Chapel Hill process?
maybe saying it this way, not allowing grandfathering is probably what I have the heartburn with currently, because I just don't think we have anything to hang our hat on that insulates us. I really don't. I mean, that's.
I don't think the grandfather, that way that you're saying the people who are ahead of the game now got lucky. And I'm for
Well,
all in or all out.
they utilize our ordinance. I mean, so I don't, if that's, somebody's gonna call that getting lucky, I mean, I guess they got lucky.
Well, yeah, I agree. It's,
but where in our ordinance does it say that that's a permitted use?
Is remember the fact that it doesn't say it's not a permitted use.
What about
Because
the-
we don't have that short-term rental defined. That's what it comes from.
If we could come up, are we allowed to come up with our own? I don't know why we can't
Well-
create our own ordinance. First of all, those Airbnbs, if that's what you're gonna call them on the west side, the fact, you can go to the tourism board and look at their numbers too. It's already declining. People are not renting them anymore. It's down 25%. All right?
Right.
It's gonna take care of itself. But to help her, and I agree with her concerns, in the short term, I would like to know if the legality of what we're doing. And if you could research that, and this is just me. I'm good with everything on there except for that item I.
Can I ask you, what is short-term rentals being defined and allowed only in the code, in the bed and breakfast? It's not, you know,
So
it's,
there has to be 2 components. To regulate something, you have to define it. And I think you said you're not sure. You said it was mentioned, but you're not sure if it's defined. As
I don't
Rob said,
think
I don't
Rob-
think we have the use short-term rental defined. And then when you define it, what the courts have said is then you must regulate it, right? So in other words, you've got a definition, you insert it into your code, and then you apply different regulations in various zoning districts perhaps to that particular zoning definition. And that's why we can't regulate and why I can't sit here and say that having a short-term rental right now in Kitty Hawk or in any district is not allowed.
Well, and more to that point, if we don't have a definition, then they can go down the whole beach road and shut Joe Lamb down tomorrow then, correct?
Casey, and I really hate to do this, you and Rob have worked extremely hard. Is there anything else that you may could find out if we were to table this matter to the next meeting that could help Ms. Wells and help this council?
Rob, I have not. Have you though, I know David Owens and you have had quite a bit of back and forth. David Owens spoke to you guys at one point with the School of Government, obviously just a guru in these type of land use matters. Have you spoken to him, certainly since he came from Chapel Hill when he moved out here, have you spoken to him about his thoughts on grandfathering?
Or can we bring him in?
That would be up to him.
I can't speak for him. I'll ask him myself.
No, he hasn't said one way or the other in the conversation. Most of the talks that I've had with him recently were on different subjects, but,
I was just curious, I didn't know if that's something that you guys had run by, but that's an avenue we can pursue. I mean, my only hesitation is somewhat common sense, like David was saying. Somebody was following the rules when they went and, built their ADU, and they're using it as allowed simply because we don't have it in our code defined and capable of regulation, and now we're saying you can't do that without, again, you wait long enough, there'll be a court case on it. Right now, we just don't have anything that definitively says one way or the other. That's my only
Why
fear.
doesn't he have to conform to the bed and breakfast rules then?
Because it's not a bed and breakfast by definition, not what they're proposed. Bed and breakfast must also come with a service such as breakfast. That's why they call it.
That is labeled commercial too.
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
And what?
And I think
do you use Airbnb?
there's a bunch of different.
It's totally
I do
different.
for some of the
Different use.
rentals that I have, yes.
What's that?
Yeah, I do for some of the rentals that I have.
Okay.
Right, so I'm familiar with them, I've been using them a long time. And they serve a good purpose, but I just, when it gets to be multiple ones on one lot in a residential area, it does affect your neighborhood. It changes it a lot.
I think we all can attest to experiencing that in our own homes.
Yeah, the noise and the traffic.
Airbnb, this could fall into the question and the concern that I have that our ordinances are not up to date and
Yes.
have not been reviewed for many years. And back in the day that Airbnb was put in there, that's all there was. Maybe bed and breakfast. That's all there was.
Right.
And then Airbnb came in and we didn't update.
I think that's a lot part of the problem.
Rob, did you have?
Yeah. and
I
I'm
was just gonna add, if I didn't catch who suggested the possibility of tabling, and then Casey and I looked into it, I'm happy to reach out to like the planning listserv, planners from all across the state to get input from what they all do. We'll add in the talk of, short-term rentals, where they're allowed, where they, are they grandfathered? Because we don't have them defined as a land use, like the BR1 district, one of the only permitted uses by right there is single-family residence. So if we're gonna start saying, well, because we haven't said they're okay over here, then they're not okay over there either. And I don't think we wanna.
Well, I tell you what, I'll use my neighborhood as an example in First Black Ridge, okay? When that neighborhood was developed, it was developed for it to be rental properties. Now that the developer's out, and a lot of the residents, including myself, would like to see them go away, even though I'm a property rights guy first and foremost, we can't do it because it wasn't defined up front. We will get sued if we adopt that tonight.
Oh, yeah.
So what I would like to do personally is ask you guys to come up with some more research. Can we approve everything but that tonight, or do we have to table the whole thing?
But before we do anything, I need to find out, is there anyone here that would like to speak at this public hearing? Come on up, sir. You're frustrated, I can tell.
So much to unpack here. I don't know if I can cover it all in 5 minutes. There's been a lot of different things discussed, but as far as the grandfathering goes, it's absolutely insane to me that you would go back in history and say someone that had an existing use, that you would take that use away from them. If the town of Kitty Hawk said, we're gonna change our residential lot coverage to 25%, you all have 30% on your lot coverage, what 5% are you gonna give up?
Right.
You can't go backwards in history and say, you had this use, you had this right. I'm a property rights guy. This is insane to me that we would be talking. It sounds to me like there's somebody out there that built something that people don't like. And I'm not familiar with the specifics of it, but I understand it's frustrating for those people that live by there. But to write a rule that applies to this entire zone and to say, well, nobody else can do it because we got a bad actor in the community. There are noise ordinances and there's police forces and things like that and ways to control it. And as you indicated, some of these things peter out because the rent by the night or the short-term rental is a lot of work. There's a lot of money to be made in it if you're willing to do the work. I have 4 daughters. They're all born and raised here on the Outer Banks. I want them all to live in Kitty Hawk. That's my dream. My oldest has a piece of property under contract in the village. She's 24 years old. Gonna make ends meet. If she wants to do the work to rent that place by the night so she can make her mortgage payment, let her do it.
I agree.
Property rights. As far as the affordable housing thing, that's crazy that we're gonna ask individual property owners in Kitty Hawk to solve the affordable housing problem on the Outer Banks by stepping on their necks. I worked for Woda Cooper. We looked at Bowser Town. We looked at pieces of land in Nags Head. We looked at pieces of land in Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk was the only town that was actually willing to entertain it. Those other places said, no, we don't want it. So you're going to look and you're going to say, oh, these individual property owners that built this ADU and counted on this revenue stream, we're going to say you got to convert. You can't do it anymore. You can't do it in the future if it's a new one. And our secondary hope is it'll make more properties available for long-term rental, for affordable housing. That's BS. It's a cop-out. There's a bigger problem here. It's not to be solved on the backs of the individual property owners in Kitty Hawk. So again, there's a lot here, but as you can tell, I don't support this in any way, shape, or form. I understand there's some bad actors and there's some problems with particular developments. To have rules made to apply to an entire zoning district when there are people out there renting their primary homes by the night. There are people out there running ADUs and renting them by the night, and they're successful, and they're not infringing upon their neighbors' rights with noise and with fireworks and whatnot. You gotta let people do what they want. It's the reason I moved to Kitty Hawk instead of Kilda Hills or Nags Head. You wanna be under someone's thumb, go there. Thank you.
Again, I appreciate your comment. I'm just going to make, for the record, I mean, the nightly rental on the west side is dropping drastically. People are going to put it back in year round because they're going to make more money.
All right, so anyone else like to speak at this public hearing? Come on up, sir. I saw you cringing out there. I knew you were.
Duke Garrity, Government Affairs Director, Outer Banks Home Building Association. General Assembly was supposed to come up with an ADU rule statewide this year. If it wasn't an election year and they had a self-imposed deadline to get out of there before the 4th of July, it'd probably get done. But they want to get out and campaign. So it just got kicked around. It's a problem across the whole state. So whatever you come up with, you might want to put it in pencil because next year something will come through and it may change. But they want to make something uniform and they want to do it right. But it's a problem all over. We got an affordable housing problem all over the state, and that's what they're working on. They're tired of their phones ringing. If you think your phones are ringing, hear about it. You can see what goes on in Raleigh. There's people all over. So thank you for working on it. It's a good idea. We, the Home Builders Association, possibly believe in ADUs, believe in affordable housing. We're working on it now too. So I appreciate it, but just to let you know, that's what's going on. I got an email last week saying, is anything going to get done before the session ends? And they said no.
Well, they may come back for a short session.
They'll bring it back next year.
Correct.
It'll have to be a new rule, but it'll come back next year, I'm sure.
But it'll be defined by next year, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Anyone else like to speak? Donna?
Donna Creek, Government Affairs Director for the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, whose business is short-term rentals. And the advertisement on your public hearing notice tonight is on accessory dwelling units. That's what the hearing is advertised for, accessory dwelling units and the regulations that apply to them in the VR1 district. This is somehow delved into a discussion on the negative effects of short-term rentals from a third-party marketing group, Airbnb. They're not realtors, they're not licensed real estate agents. And so if the board in their right wants to regulate short-term rentals, then let the public know that so I can let my association know that. And we can have a debate about that and address that. There's other towns in Dare County have ADU restrictions and they're geared to year-round occupancy. The ones Dare County have are year-round occupancy. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight because I'm okay with the ADUs and the year-round occupancy. When Ms. Wells first submitted this to the planning board, it was an outright prohibition on a person being able to rent their whole house as a vacation rental. And your attorney has sat right here and said North Carolina law supports the fact that renting your house is not a commercial activity. Your land use plan that was recently adopted has a policy in there that talks about regulating the impacts of short-term rentals. Regulate is different than prohibit. And so if the town wants to go down that course, then so be it, that's your prerogative. Court cases give you that right to regulate where you can have them, where you can zone them. But again, that's not what's on your agenda tonight. It's about ADUs. And if you're going to talk about ADUs, then let's talk about ADUs. And if you're going to talk about short-term rentals, then by all means talk about short-term rentals, but give us some advance notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
I'm going to kind
Come on up, sir. Please state your name and address, please, sir.
Craig Merrill, 4227 Lindbergh, and I'm on the planning board when we saw this, and I totally empathize with Mrs. Wells' intent, and I was one of the people that had difficulty with the short-term limit on how people had to comply. I went back and looked at the old town council minutes, and I think one of the things that would, as David has suggested, have you in legal problem is the council acknowledged short-term rentals were a risk of ADUs and essentially chose not to mitigate that risk. Said it was worth it because of all the benefits that they added. So I do think that needs to be looked at some more. In trying to think of a middle way, I wonder if you couldn't grandfather the people that exist, but then say, if you stop using in that manner for X period of time, you must come in compliance, right? If you stop being a short-term rental for 6 months, then you need to come in compliance with the current regulation, and then that might be a nice balance. You know, you're not taking the rug out from under their feet, but on the other hand, you're not leaving it an infinite time for them to continue doing something that many people feel is disturbing to the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Come on up, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Grace Anloff. I am a local licensed real estate agent, realtor. I grew up off Eckner Street. I am the 24-year-old that has the property under contract in the VR1 zoning district. So I've spoken at 2 meetings so far. I've attended 4 discussing this matter. We can talk for hours about the different topics that I brought up previously about what tourism does for the community, what ADUs do for the community, the occupancy tax that is derived from accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, all of that. We can go into detail on how difficult it is to run an Airbnb. I have Airbnbs that I own and manage in Currituck. It's not an easy thing to do, and you also have to have a certain quality to get a certain guest, and it's all based on reviews, which are important, that we maintain 5-star, and it's not just this slummy situation that I allow people to live in or stay at. But mostly, I'd like to go over a few things that goes with the real estate portion of it, and that is that people bought these properties. I'm purchasing a property in the VR1 zoning district that currently, as I'm buying it and assigning a price in it mentally in my mind, with the thought that I can build an accessory dwelling unit on it in the future, short-term, rent it, make money off of it. People have bought homes for years, built accessory dwelling units. I'm very familiar with the cost to build a home, to build an ADU. It is not cheap. Labor is not cheap. And so if I buy a piece of property, or I have a client that buys a piece of property, knowing that they can do that, or that it's already built and they spend a certain amount of money with the idea that they can make a certain amount of money short-term renting the property, and then to take that away, it infringes on their personal property rights. It takes away the ability for them to pay their mortgage. It takes away the resale value, or as Mr. Tillett pointed out. Those that stay grandfathered, they're lucky. Well then, why should I be hurt as a property owner when my neighbor built their ADU before I did? So these are just food for thought, things to think about. The other thing, when it comes to accessory dwelling units, I've heard the term multiple tonight several times. My understanding is you're allowed to have one primary home and you're allowed to have one accessory dwelling unit. That's 2 units, not multiple. Multiple family housing is completely different than one primary, one accessory unit. If there are multiple units, 3 or 4 on the VR1 zoning district, I think that would be a different issue. My other request is when we think about tourism in general, every job I've ever had, I grew up here, has been derived off of tourism. I went to college because I worked and made money at Seascape Golf Course, and tourists funded my education. I have a bachelor's degree from ECU in business. They paid for it because I worked and had the opportunities that come from tourism. So I think as a general consensus, I know it's frustrating. I had a guy yesterday, I was going to see my parents. He drove by like crazy. He passed me on oncoming traffic. He was from Maryland. No offense to anybody from Maryland in the room, but he was on vacation. And I was just turning into my parents' house, and he drove by me like crazy. I get it's frustrating, but they are what fuels our economy. So when we are thinking about making restrictions, we're thinking about the bread and butter of what gives us jobs, I would ask that you keep in mind that they are what makes us who we are. We are not Chapel Hill. We are not Pennsylvania. We are Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And there's something to be said about that, and that we graciously accept people here to come on vacation because it is a beautiful place. The other thing I ask is that I understand everybody can come up and make text amendments, they can submit things. It's a beautiful thing that we give our citizens the opportunity to do so. But if there is a situation with someone's neighbor and they have a personal issue, I would ask that it does not become the responsibility of all of the other property owners in the district or the town to fix that issue. Because I've had issues with neighbors, I resolve them between me and my neighbor, or I just have to deal with it, or I sell my house and move. I don't ask everybody on the street to be involved in it. And if I did want to live in a certain place that dictates, oh, thanks, sorry guys. Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you so much, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Come on up.
Hi, Sharon Sullivan, 3708 Herbert Perry Road. I'm upset because of what I just heard, but it's not a personal issue with me, other than it's personal that there's 2 houses on top of me now. And the 2 houses are both rented. They're not, nobody lives in the big house. They're both small. It's a VR1 only, and it only applies to when nobody is living in one of those houses. So it's not a neighbor fight. I'm a good neighbor to them, but I just don't want this to happen anywhere else in Kitty Hawk. I don't want anybody to buy a little strip of property and to fill it up with ADUs or short-term rentals or whatever you want to call it. But it's not personal. I don't want this to happen anywhere else to anyone else. And I can't just move. My property's been in my family for over 100 years. So now I feel like it's devalued because I have, and they're pretty, they're nice. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, counsel.
I have one more question for Rob.
All right.
Rob, any new permits being pulled for, I'm not gonna call it an Airbnb, an ADU? In the village?
I would have to look at the permit management. I've kind of shifted some duties around, and I've not been as hands-on on the day-to-day permitting, so I don't have that information offhand.
I would like the council to know whenever you get time.
Okay.
Follow up a little bit on that too, Rob. What was, just out of curiosity, what was the process used to find out what existing nonconformities that this text amendment would have created? You said it was 2 or possibly 3.
That I was able, the one that I referenced saying a possibility of the third is the second one owned by the gentleman at the end of Herbert Perry, which has gotten his COs and they're listed on Airbnb now.
How did we find the other ones? I know one was probably a complaint. What is there?
Right,
Was there
it was,
a process to find the other ones?
I may have missed, there might be some out in existence that I missed, but I browsed different short-term rental platforms, some that accessory dwelling units that I knew existed, and then kind of looked at the different short-term rental platforms to see if I could find if there were multiple ones listed on the same property. And so the ones that were in the staff report were the ones that I was able to find multiple short-term listings on a single property. Like, they don't give you the exact address, but if you're in the area, like, you know which properties they're talking about.
Just hypothetically, if we passed this text amendment and decided to grandfather the existings, how confident are you that it was only 3 possible ones that were using double rent?
Right. It'd be tough, and it'd be tough in the future if, you know, we are complaint driven when we do code enforcement activities, and if someone called and said that, you know, they had 2 new short-term rentals, you know, I guess they would have to, sending our violation letter, you know, they would be on them to provide documentation showing that they were in operation prior to whatever date that was set on here. So I think there would be ways for the owners to verify, but no, it would be a challenge.
Yeah.
And I don't think staff would necessarily be able to dedicate a day or 2 days to go around and look at every short-term rental to see what, you know, which ones.
I can assure you that they will complain. Neighbors will tell on you every time. So, I think I need more information before I'm ready to vote on
All right,
this tonight.
we're still in public hearing. Any more
Yeah, I
questions?
understand.
In public hearing. Okay, thank you. Need a motion to go back in a regular
So
session.
moved.
Thank you, David. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Dylan. All in favor?
Aye.
Chief, can you try to address Ms. Wells' complaint about speeding on Herbert Perry? Yes, sir. Get on that. And Donna Creek, thank you for trying to get us back on track.
She's good at that.
She is very good at it. Thank you, Donna. She's exactly right, too. All right, any discussion? Council, motion? What would you like to do?
I'm going to speak for me because I've been speaking a lot tonight. I prefer to table it because I want to help Ms. Wells out. But if I have to vote on it all, I can't get behind the 12 months. I just can't do it as a real estate broker, as a builder. I just can't do it.
Council
That's just me.
discussion?
But I'm open to suggestions on how to handle it.
Is anybody in favor of the table? Would you like to make a motion?
I really hate to do that to Ms. Wells, but
I do too.
think we've got to take it.
I agree. I hate to do it as well. She's worked a long time on this. But I want to get it.
Another month, maybe?
Yeah.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's a good decision. I really do, because we need to get it right, and you know, I've been trying to get help and information, so it's great. It's fine by me.
Yeah, I have talked to Amy and with me, I see Dave and your side and so I'd like to work through it. Personally, once again, I don't think they were ever permitted to be grandfathered, but I do understand it. And like you said, I get that part. And I really, and the last thing I'd ever want to do is cause anybody hardship. That's not it. But I think the goal here is to, whatever we do, to get it right for the future. What's happened already, our hands sounds like might be tied, and to do somebody that, whether they were permitted or not, I think they felt like, well, the guy down the road's doing it, I can do it, and nobody stopped them. So whether it's the town's fault, I don't know. Once again, I think we need to look into that, and we will. But as far as what we're talking about tonight, we have this particular advertised text amendment that we're not comfortable with because of the wording. So I support the tabling also until we can get it
We need a
straight.
motion.
Yes, just
All right.
let's make sure we've got that clear motion out there.
For the record, I was not on this board when ADUs were even passed, but I make a motion to table this tonight.
Have a second.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed. Thank you, everyone.
Can I make a motion, call it quits for the night? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, item D, text amendment, dwelling size. Need a motion to go back into public hearing.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing about single-family dwelling size.
All right. This proposal you can see in the subject line of the memo. It applies to several districts. Anywhere that references detached single-family dwellings as a permitted use. The proposal under the permitted uses as the line says detached single-family dwellings not to include mobile or manufactured homes. Single-family dwellings shall not have a maximum septic capacity to serve more than 14 overnight occupants and shall not exceed 6,000 square feet of conditioned living space. Kitty Hawk's recently adopted future land use plan identifies the community vision as, quote, the town of Kitty Hawk is a community-focused, family-oriented, low-key Outer Banks village that prioritizes enhancing natural resources, preserving history, and improving resiliency. We strive to balance the needs of Kitty Hawk's year-round residents and visitors while improving everyday coastal living. Goal 3 in the adopted plan is to reinforce Kitty Hawk's unique coastal identity and sense of community through high-quality design and protection of natural and cultural resources. As we've seen in some of our neighboring communities here, the development of some of these oversized dwellings can result in large-scale structures that can house large mounds, 40 plus people in some cases. Kitty Hawk's scale of increasing side yard setbacks based on the size of a proposed dwelling has prevented this type of development to a large degree on our oceanside lots. However, a trend that is becoming more common that we've been seeing permitting is that the old beach box cottages are being either demolished or moved out of town, and new houses being built in their place. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that developer can buy 2 of these lots, take both cottages down, recombine, and then the sliding scale, the side yard setbacks wouldn't really prevent them from doing these bigger structures that we're talking about. Again, it's not something that's happened yet, but it's definitely a possibility. So as I mentioned, the proposed language that I showed the staff report, I've got it written in the BR1 district, but this would apply to BR1, 2, 3, BC1 and 2, BH1, VR1, 2, and 3, or VC1, 2, and 3 in the Kitty Hawk Woods district. That's all the districts that we have the single-family residence as a permitted use. As noted in Goal 3 and in the relevant policies listed in the staff report from the adopted future land use plan, the type of large-scale, oversized, single-family dwelling is contrary to that character of Kitty Hawk that was identified in the plan. I will note that NCGS 160D-702B prohibits localities from regulating building design elements, except in certain scenarios. Per 160D, the phrase building design elements means exterior building color, type, or style of exterior cladding material, style or materials of roof structures or porches, exterior non-structural architectural ornamentation, location or architectural stylings of windows and doors, including garage doors, the number and types of rooms, and the interior layout of rooms. It goes on to state that the phrase building design elements does not include any of the following: height, bulk, orientation, or location of a structure on a zoning lot, the use of buffering or screening to minimize visual impacts to mitigate the impacts of light and noise or to protect the privacy of neighbors, or 3, regulations adopted pursuant to this article governing the permitted uses of land or structures subject to the North Carolina Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings. In preparing this, I looked over tax information of over 100 developed properties in town. And from what I was able to find, setting an upper limit of 6,000 square feet of conditioned space would not create any non-conforming structures as it relates to the size of the conditioned space. I think the largest I was able to find, I believe, was just over 5,800 square feet of conditioned space. There are 3 single-family dwellings that have an occupancy greater than the proposed 14, and none of them are, I think the largest one of those was like 2,400 square feet, so they've got them crammed in on those ones. So as in the following policies and objectives relevant to the application and the land use plan is policy 3.4, encourage residential that fits Kitty Hawk's character, maintain zoning regulations that protect the character of Kitty Hawk's neighborhoods, continue to maintain regulations that encourage mostly single-family homes to maintain the overall residential character of Kitty Hawk. Planning board reviewed this at their April 25th meeting, unanimously recommended approval. I will note that Southern Shores has the same caps as being proposed here, 6,000 square feet conditioned space, 14 occupants. Casey referenced David Owens earlier. I did speak with him on this proposal, and he was confident that that language that's listed in the 160D that's in the staff report, he was very confident in the bulk part, limiting the overall size. He said from his discussions, there are attorneys across the state that have differing opinions on the occupancy, but he feels confident that that one is covered as well. I'll turn it over to the council.
Any questions for Rob, council? Is anyone here tonight who would like to speak in this public hearing? Come on up, sir.
Good evening again, Duke Garrity, Outer Banks Home Builders Association Government Affairs Director. In 2015 session, Senate Bill 25, I know you've seen it because we just quoted General Statute 160D. There were some changes made and a little bit of change in there, but the regulations prohibited by this subsection may not be applied directly or indirectly. And then this lettering says the number and types of rooms, bedrooms, number and types of rooms. The reason that was put in and those the elements and the decoration elements, it wasn't to stop big houses. It was to allow small houses. There were some towns in the middle of the state, they didn't want any Habitat for Humanity houses, so they made you put in side entrance garages, porches, dormers, all kinds of aesthetics, so that they wouldn't have these small houses, and this was put. At the same token, with that wording, it kind of put a stall on some of the big houses that were being built here. And a big house in those days was about 8 bedrooms or 9 bedrooms. It wasn't the 25-bedroom homes that we have here right now. Mr. Varnell's shaking his head. You have on your proposed ordinance here 14 occupants. That occupancy is usually done by the septic system, 2 people per bedroom, and that's how you do it. By the statute, you're not supposed to design the occupants by the bedrooms or the septic system. Nags Head does it, Southern Shores does it, leaving themselves open, but nobody wants to challenge it. We can't think of a better way of doing it than putting the language in there and worry about it. Southern Shores has a, I can't remember what theirs is right now, but they put a 12-bedroom home in there 2 years ago. They couldn't stop it. So I just want you to be sure of it, be aware of it. Somebody may challenge you on this. We don't have, the Anabanks Home Builders doesn't have a problem with 6,000 square feet. We don't have a problem with your town deciding how big to have the houses. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Anyone else like to speak during this public hearing? All right, council, I'll entertain a motion to go back into regular session.
So moved.
Motion made by David, second. Second by Straw. All in favor? Aye. All right, we're back in regular session, council. What would you like to do in this matter?
I move to approve the proposed text amendment to section 42-225, -247, -248, -249, -250, -251, -253, -273, -274, -275, -276, -277, -278 relevant districts regulations as presented in this staff report. Town council finds this proposed to be consistent with the town's adopted land use plan.
Thank you, Jeff. Need a second? Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by David. You almost talked as much as Rob and I.
Not done yet.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you, council. All right, we need to schedule some public hearings. Item 8A, zoning text amendment for mini warehouse in PCD. Who would like to make that motion? Item 8A.
Where is it at? I'm happy to do it.
I move to set a public hearing at the town council meeting on August 5th, 2024 to consider the proposed text amendment to section 42-414B related to mini warehouses within planned commercial developments. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by David. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Item 8B, zoning text amendment, lot coverage, permeable paving materials. I need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to set a public hearing at the town council meeting on August 5th, 2024 to consider the proposed text amendment to section 42-1 in relevant residential and commercial zones as related to lot coverage and permeable materials.
Second.
Second by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Item 8C, special use permit site plan on the Woods Road. Can I get a motion in that matter, please?
I move to set a public hearing at the town council meeting on August 5th, 2024 to consider the proposed special use permit and commercial site plan for a mini warehouse in the PCD located at 6100 North Crowtown Highway.
Thank you, David. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we have no old business. Item 10, Councilman Hines requested to have a discussion regarding planning board membership. Staff, Melody and Lauren, I think both have done some research for us, got us some information regarding other times, but David, I'll let you have it.
Okay, so since I've been on this council, it's always been peculiar to me why we would have alternate members that are, I came to the planning board and in fact, we were here just the other night together. I believe we have an alternate member sitting in the audience who has discussion, gets paid, but has no vote unless somebody else is not here. I've never understood I've had discussions with Rob. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I defer to how you feel about it too. And I think we, I don't want to speak for you, but to me, I don't think we need to have an alternate tag on planning board members if they're going to be paid to sit here and have discussion. I don't remember when I got on the county planning board. I'd have to ask Ms. Creek, but it's been many years ago. And I think Southern Shores has alternate members, but one of them is a liaison. Is that correct? For Martin's Point, maybe?
Yeah, they've got 5 regular members, 2 alternates, and 1 ETJ representative.
Right. And I also feel like, too, by having a full board, a full discussion, I think that's a good thing. I think it gives more diversity to the conversation. When you have 2 members that sit over here, which have discussion but doesn't have a vote unless somebody's not in attendance, I just don't understand that, okay? And then further to that point, I just think it balances the board better. Rob, I'll let you speak. I personally would like to see the alternate tags removed, everybody be a full voting member. Literally, Southern Shores is the only other town on the Outer Banks that does that. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so I'll defer to you and let you and the town manager if y'all have anything to add on to that. But I know I've had conversations with Melody about this, numerous conversations about this. So I wanted to bring it up.
Right. I mean, obviously we serve at the pleasure of council, so whatever you all decide and is fine with the way we do it. Just I guess from a practicality standpoint, you can see in the memo that was put together. Currently, we've got 5 members, so the quorum for having voting at the meetings is 3 in attendance. But we do have the 2 alternates that typically, even when we do have an absence or 2, we'll have 4 or 5 people there to vote. If it was all 7 regular voting members, the quorum would go up to 4, which I think in my time that I've been here, I don't think we have had any meetings where we haven't had at least 4 members there. So I don't think it would be a detriment to delay any kind of business or anything. Councilman Hines, right? The alternates, they prepare the same. They participate in the discussion. They might have strong feelings one way or another on certain things, but unless it's dependent on whether there's a full attendance of the regular members, whether they can vote or just try to persuade people through discussion. Like I said, if council wanted to do turn them all 7 regular voting members, like I mentioned in the staff report, it would, two items in town code would have to be changed, the section 26-20A and 26-22. So you got in front of you there, how every other board on the planning board on the beach is composed. We've got 5 regular members in Duck. Southern Shores has 5 regular members, 2 alternates, and 1 ETJ representative. KDH has 7 members. Nags Head 7. Manio's 5, and Dare County is 7. So.
All right. Like all matters, this is a big decision, council. This is important to be first. Jeff, you and I were alternates for a long time together, so we know what's involved here. But I'd like input from each council member, please. Just what you think. Do we need to do this? Is it a good thing?
I clearly think it is, or I wouldn't have brought it up.
Okay.
So,
Do it.
I have mixed feelings on it, to be honest with you. I'm a big fan of if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I also understand the intent here. If Southern Shores is the only one who does this, if the normal is either 7 or 5, not normal, but more frequently consistent, yeah. In the event that there's not a quorum on a planning board, does that bypass planning board, you go straight to council? Does it go another month to catch planning board for the next month before it gets to council?
I was say, I think it would
If it's,
go back.
if it's something that's required.
Yeah,
to
like,
go through.
yeah,
So
zoning
it's
text
delayed
amendment.
with
like-
no quorum.
Right, zoning text amendments, like they have to be reviewed by the planning board. We do have our, you know, our second meeting date built into every month, like you guys mentioned you were here Thursday night. So if we had a, you know, a regular meeting date and didn't have a quorum, and it's same as it would be today, then, you know, we'd try to schedule that backup date to try to not push everything back by another month.
Can I, go ahead.
No, but I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
Can
ahead.
I ask you how many times you've seen the planning board not have a quorum?
I don't recall any since
Okay.
I've been here.
Yeah.
And I don't think, just off the top of my head, I don't think, even if quorum were 4, I don't think there'd been maybe one in the almost 10 years that I've been here that.
That was
might
during
have it.
spring break.
Yes.
Right. So clearly, a lot of people were not here to have kids. But more to the point, when we were here the other night, there was 2 people missing. So all the more reason why I feel like it needs to be, everybody's a voting member.
And clarify that Thursday meeting night, we had 1 regular member absent and 1 alternate was
Correct.
absent. So the alternate that was in attendance stepped in to become that 5th voting member.
Right.
Anything else, Bill?
That's all I have.
Jeff?
Well, like you said, we both started on the planning, well, different, but we spent, I think, 7 years together on the planning board. And even in the beginning, with 5 voting and 7 of us there, sometimes it was easy to get off track, you know, 7 of us talking, and if you don't have a good chairman, sometimes like tonight, we can end up talking for an hour over something that really weren't on the agenda. And when you have an applicant come in here and he's bringing 2 lawyers with him on a big project sitting out here, and now he's got to listen to a whole lot more people, and that's the clock's ticking on the man paying the guy in the suit. We tried to streamline things years ago. You don't have to come to the planning board. We can go straight to you. Remember, we changed some things, trying to relieve the financial burden on some of the applicants coming in. And I know I was on the recreation committee where there was quite a few people, and it was very hard to get a lot done with everybody going at it. And in my 7 years on the board, we didn't miss a meeting, and I think it went fine. So I do get it. If we were a bigger town, maybe, I don't know. It seems like the smaller towns have 5 and the bigger have 7. I mean, so it's worked since the incorporation of the town. So I kind of, it's just going to be more cost to the town, more, the applicant's going to have to, or you're going to have alternates again, right? So you're going, I mean.
I wouldn't believe so.
No.
And so how about, so you're just going to pay them all?
Nothing changes.
Well, they currently are.
Right.
Yeah, all 7 currently.
But all 7 vote.
No.
That's all I'm asking for, is all 7 get to vote. Everybody's paid the same, no matter what. There's no extra cost.
No matter what. Doesn't matter, doesn't
No,
change.
it don't matter.
And now, if they weren't being paid, then I would totally agree to leave it be. But they're being paid to sit here, so it's no extra cost to the town of Kitty Hawk. These 7 members are being paid every night they're here anyway.
But what difference, what is the advantage of their actual, the vote? If we have 5 voting, we kind of get the gist of what the planning board wants out of the 5. What is the advantage of 2 more votes?
Because I think sometimes the other 2 that don't have a vote could change what the other ones are doing, for better or for worse. I think it opens it up a little bit more to be fair to the applicant. That's just my opinion.
Anything else, Jeff?
Well, once again, I'm gonna go, we've been 5 since incorporation, I'm good with 5.
Charlotte?
They do the same work to be ready for the meeting. They do the same research, sometimes more. And they are, they do have input. Now, just because they don't have a vote, they do have input. And that alone can sway the thinking of members. But, I'm really kind of torn. I don't see a problem with the 7.
With the 7 being all voting members?
Yes.
I agree.
I'm kind of like Jeff. I don't see any need to change it. That's the way it's always been.
And I'm fine with that.
If the reason to change is somebody on the planning board, then that's another issue we need to look at.
Well, I agree with that too. I just don't see the issue of somebody sitting up here doing the same amount of research, the same amount of everything, but they don't get to say yay or nay.
But they knew that when they signed up.
I understand.
And part of that is, the reason that they're there is so that they're, even as an alternate, and you get into discussion, and usually the alternate's the brand new guy on the planning board, and it gives him a chance to really get his feet in and to understand. I know my first night, I was scared to death, and there was people that had been there for a while, and I had no problem being an alternate for a little while, so till I felt comfortable with my decisions that I was making, and then when all of a sudden I'd show up and there a regular voting member weren't there, heartburn. And you go, me, I've got to vote. But I knew I was ready because I'd gone to every meeting and stayed in the loop, even though I'd rather the other guy been there sometimes. But that was the way I felt like being an alternate, even though I was able to have the discussion. For the beginning, I was kind of relieved a little bit that I didn't have the pressure of making the decision, and until I felt like I was comfortable enough of knowing the codes and everything in the town. So, and now, once again, we have alternates that have been on there quite a long time now, so, but.
Well, so I did some research on it as well, talking to previous, mayors and whatnot. That was created back in the day because we had nobody. This is how that originally started with the alternates, going way back towards the inception of Kitty Hawk.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 2024. And if you guys want to keep it the way it is, that's fine. I think it's time to let everybody have an actual vote if we're going to be up here discussing and doing the same work. If the entire board doesn't agree with it, that's fine. But I don't understand it, why, but that's just me.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I thought we had to change some codes first. What'd you say, Casey?
Do we need a motion?
About codes?
Go ahead and leave it here.
Did you say that, or maybe it was Rob?
No, Rob was discussing that two sections would have to be changed.
If you want to make any changes, there's two sections of code.
Right.
I think if you don't make any changes, I would think that no motion would be necessary.
No, right now it's taking action on whether or not a motion to have the 7 voting or keep it the way it is. That's what currently needs to be done.
Well, I try not to attend a whole lot of planning board meetings because I just don't know that it's right for a council member to be in every planning board meeting. But I can tell you that, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, hadn't been real impressed with some of the meetings.
All right, let's get back on.
Well, I mean, that is on track with how I feel about it, so that's where I'm at with it.
Council, what you want to do, Dave?
I'll make a motion to remove the alternate tag. Doesn't sound like I have support, but I'm gonna make a motion for it.
Do we have a second for discussion? Once again, do we have a second to David's motion?
No second, motion dies.
No second? No, motion dies.
All right, motion died. But great thought, great conversation, thank you.
Well,
I get a feeling that's not going to be the end of it.
it is not going to be the end of it.
Thank you, David.
I can assure you.
Thank you, David. All right, town manager report.
Well, think I just need to say thank you to Rob. It's been the Rob show. I'm not sure if this is the town record for public hearings. It might
He
be.
gets a day off tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nah, he's been on vacation.
So we appreciate everything you do, Rob. I want to say thank you to everybody who joined the Kitty Hawk Police Department's youth fishing tournament on Saturday. We had about 45 kids and their parents, so probably over 100 people. It seems like everyone had a great time. And it would not be possible without the support from our community. So special thanks go to the Outer Banks Anglers Club, John's Drive-In, Blue Water Grill, Mom's Sweet Shop, Grandy B, Cito's Towing, Henry's Restaurant, High Cotton, Hilton Garden, Pox Art, Walmart, and TW's Bait and Tackle. The way that our community rallies to support our events is just really humbling, and we appreciate it very much. Special thanks to all the Kitty Hawk police officers who had a part in it, Kitty Hawk Fire and Rescue who attended, and also just a really special thank you to Sergeant Tyler Kouskouris who headed it all up. So we're already looking forward to next year and new ideas. Also tomorrow we are going to be wishing Sharon Davenport well as she retires with 28 years of service with the town. She has served as the police department's administration records technician for the last 28 years. She is a force that all to herself that keeps the department running and administratively and knows where all the bodies are buried. So we appreciate all of her hard work and dedication during her time. And finally, town offices will be closed in honor of Thursday, July 4th. We'll reopen on Friday the 5th, and the town's trash collection schedule will not be changing. It will remain the same.
Thank you, Melody. Casey?
I have nothing, Mayor.
All right, David?
Councilman.
I do not.
You want to have anything?
No, sir, I do
Okay,
not.
Dylan?
I'll echo Melody. Nice job tonight, Rob. Appreciate everything. I know that was a long one. And just want to wish everybody a happy Independence Day. And be safe out there.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah?
Yeah, first of all, we have some beautiful beaches, and I happened to be driving through the Carlton Smith Bathhouse, and I happened to notice some people really picking along the fence, and it got my curiosity what was going on. So I backed up and I said, excuse me, I said, well, exactly what are you doing? And they were picking up trash, cigarette butts along the fence. And I noticed, I looked around, and it was a whole bunch. And so I'm gonna give a shout out to the GR Little group for the Adopt a Beach. They were at the bathhouse, a pretty big, large group. And I don't think there is a piece of trash left on that site. They were on their hands and knees, but I'd like to thank them. And also the Better Beaches, sometimes we forget to thank them, and this year they planted a ton of beach grass, and it's really holding up really well over there. And Donnie King has done a good job with that group, and I'd like to thank them. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Jeff. Joel?
I was fortunate enough to be able to go and watch the EMTs and the their rescue, and do a mock rescue on the beach. And that was quite an event, it really was. And it's like they have a emergency room they set up right on the beach. And we should be very, very comfortable that they're there. And it was a great training exercise. The mayor was there,
Yep.
and Melody was there. But it was very, very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. And again, the fishing tournament was wonderful, a great day. Chief, thanks Sergeant Forrest again, and thanks for doing that. A lot of discussion tonight, a lot of good talk. Thank you for that. And council, I've already discussed with you, but for the August meeting, I've asked Melody to put on the agenda regarding a contingency plan for the police department. We need a decision next month for Liliana, so she won't strangle me anymore. So we need to get some information. They're gathering information for you regarding that, and we'll get that to you so we can discuss and hopefully vote at the next August meeting. Anything else? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. We are adjourned.